Clinton. How the Upper Greater deals with challenge fuel. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Challenge fuel is provided by the response of one or more people to the acts or omissions of a narcissist. Challenge fuel, as I've explained in a separate video, is both good and bad to the narcissist, because on the one hand it provides the narcissist with fuel, which is the narcissist's lifeblood, but on the other hand it threatens the need for control, and therefore the narcissist needs to do something about it. In this video, I'm examining the response of an upper greater narcissist, such as former US President Bill Clinton. For those of you who may not be fully familiar with my categorization, a brief explanation. When it comes to narcissists, they have many similarities, but there are also important differences between different types of narcissist. This doesn't mean that certain narcissists are more of a narcissist than others. They are all narcissists. They're just different types. So similarly, strawberry ice cream is ice cream. Chocolate ice cream is ice cream. Mint choc chip ice cream is ice cream. They're all ice creams. None is more of an ice cream than the other, but they're different flavors. That's the way to look at the categorization. The categorizations cover 4 schools: lesser, mid-range, greater, and ultra. Within lesser, mid-range, and greater, there are subcategories: lower lesser, middle lesser, upper lesser A, upper lesser B. Lower mid-range, middle range A, middle range B, upper mid-range. Lower greater, middle greater, and upper greater. If you'd like to understand more about those categorizations, there are plenty of videos that deal with the different subcategories, and you can also access the H.G. Malls series, which you'll find in the Knowledge Vault. Greater narcissists know what they are. They may not use the same terminology that I do, but they know that they are narcissists. They know that they're manipulative. They know that they need fuel, or what they would describe as an equivalent to that. Lower graters tend to be found a lot in politics and a lot in the military. They tend to be the iron fist and the velvet glove. Middle graters are often found in the entertainment industry, in sports. And upper graters are often found to some degree within politics alongside lower graters, but often found as part of shadowy organizations that don't actually necessarily have any particular accountability. Often found as the head of particular industries, that they are a titan of perhaps a tech industry or a banking dynasty and such like. Bill Clinton, the former US president, is an upper greater, vastly charismatic, Machiavellian, an individual who has courted controversy throughout his career, but has invariably come away unscathed from it. Some of the controversies that Bill Clinton has been involved in you'll be familiar with. For instance, the land purchase in Arkansas, the Whitewater allegations, Vince Foster's suicide, Travelgate, where there was the removal of employees in the White House travel office with the suggestion that this was to make way for cronies of Bill Clinton. The Paula Jones sexual harassment allegations, the Lewinsky affair, for which he is most famous, where Clinton gave a sworn deposition that he did not have a sexual relationship with Lewinsky. You'll remember his memorable quote, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman," which then turned out to be a lie. It's important to understand that an upper greater, particularly one that is prominent in the way that Bill Clinton was and isn't above receiving criticism and controversy. Many upper graters you'll never have heard of. They operate between the lines. They operate in those shadowy corridors, acting like in eminence grise, real puppet masters that don't court fame. But some upper graters will do so because the fame attributes to the ability to control and the drawing of fuel. And for Clinton, who is known as a very charismatic individual who achieved the position of being very popular, for a period of time at least, President of the United States. Indeed, it was entertaining to note that even during the Lewinsky scandal and his subsequent impeachment, more about that in a moment, his actual popularity as president increased. Such is his ability to dupe individuals, and, as is often said by those who've met Clinton, that he makes you feel like you're the center of the room and that nobody else matters. A particularly manipulative skill that this upper greater has used to considerable effect. But like many narcissists, he engages in conduct and activity that results in criticism and the provision of challenge fuel. And you will recall that at the time, Clinton was only the third president to find himself subjected to impeachment proceedings. The first was Andrew Johnson, then Richard Nixon, who resigned before the impeachment could take place, and then, at the time, next was Bill Clinton. There were 2 articles of impeachment against him, with the specific charges against Clinton being lying under oath and obstruction of justice. 2 other articles had been considered but were rejected by the House of Representatives vote. Clinton's impeachment came after a formal House inquiry which had been launched on October 8, 1998. The charges for which Clinton was impeached stemmed from a sexual harassment lawsuit filed against Clinton by Paula Jones. During pre-trial discovery in the lawsuit, Clinton gave testimony denying that he engaged in a sexual relationship with White House intern Monica Lewinsky. The catalyst for the president's impeachment was the Starr Report, a September 1998 report prepared by Ken Starr, independent counsel for the House Judiciary Committee. The Starr Report included details outlining a sexual relationship between Clinton and Lewinsky. The approved articles of impeachment would be submitted to the United States Senate on January 7, 1999. A trial in the Senate then began. Clinton was acquitted on both counts, as neither received the necessary 2/3 majority vote of the senators present for conviction and removal from office. In this instance, 67 votes were needed. On Article 1, 45 senators voted to convict, while 55 voted for acquittal. On Article 2, 50 senators voted to convict, while 50 voted for acquittal. Clinton remained in office for the remainder of his second term. Now, at the time, whilst the internet was in its infancy, there was substantial mainstream media coverage of this as a hitherto popular and successful president found himself subjected to impeachment. News agencies around the world covered this. And therefore, there was considerable commentary across mass media and from the general public by way of reaction to the allegations against Bill Clinton. This all amounted to a massive amount of challenge fuel for Clinton. Now, whilst you will agree that in some instances Clinton undertook provocative acts, because as a whole that's what narcissists do, you would not describe him as a highly provocative narcissist in the mould, for instance, of Donald Trump, or a highly provocative narcissist in the mould of, say, Andrew Tate. With Clinton, he didn't rely on a bludgeoning belligerent approach, but rather of essentially being a smoothie, being charismatic, the twinkle in his eye, the way that he made people feel important so that they would bend to his will, the way that he brought people in to his confidence, making them feel extremely loyal to him. That was the way that he would go about matters. But how would an upper greater such as him deal with the provision of mass challenge fuel arising around the circumstances of his impeachment? Would it be something that would cause him to think that he needed to go and find another intern to bang? Would it be the case that it would cause him to indulge in some kind of drink or drug spree in order to alleviate the threat to control? How might an upper greater deal with such a response? Well, as you would expect, the provision of the fuel is not something that would be turned down. It wasn't altogether welcome in the way that, for instance, Donald Trump welcomes challenge fuel. It certainly validates the existence of Clinton to be talked about to that extent, but he would rather it were not the case. He would rather the challenge fuel didn't exist, and he would actually prefer that it would be pure positive or pure negative fuel that he had instigated. Nevertheless, there is the issue, naturally, that comes with regard to the question of control. As I've explained separately, this isn't about how Bill Clinton goes about asserting control on a one-on-one individual basis, but how he would deal with the situation of the receipt of mass challenge fuel. How would an Upper Greater handle that? He wasn't in a position to make a mass pronouncement to deal with it all. That would not be effective, simply because not everybody would hear it and not everybody would accept it. And therefore, whilst of course public statements had to be made for the sake of appearances and facade management, he would recognise that that would not afford him the control that he sought. Similarly, he would not be given to complaining and whinging about his circumstances to others. He would recognise that he would need to suck it up, because he, as a type of narcissist that thinks ahead, unlike the mid-range or lesser narcissists, he understands that basically the old adage of you can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs is applicable. He understands that there are collateral consequences, and what he would seek to do would be to minimise those collateral consequences as much as possible. In his mind, the ends very much justifies the means. However, the means need to be kept quiet and hidden as much as possible so as not to dent the facade that he had of the twinkly-eyed charismatic leader. What he was able to rely upon in all of this was the certainty that despite impeachment proceedings being launched against him, they would never succeed. You see, when it comes to the Upper Greater, whilst they recognise that there will be numerous battles along the way, he knows that the war will always be won, because he is prepared beforehand to ensure that it is won. In the same way that in relation to the Whitewater allegations, no actual charges were levelled against the Clintons, in the same way that whilst there was a lot of noise made about Travelgate, again, no sanctions were applied against Clinton, he knew that despite there being impeachment proceedings, he wouldn't be impeached, because he knew that the two-thirds majority would never be obtained. He knew that the majority of those making the decisions would fall along party lines, and whilst there were a small number that voted as against what they would be expected to on party lines, even taking into account that contingency, he knew, as the Upper Greater that he was, that despite all of this noise and fury that surrounded the impeachment proceedings, he would not be impeached. You see, the Upper Greater essentially knows the outcome before it occurs, and takes a calculated risk with regard to the manipulations and machinations that he engages in. The various scandals and controversies, he has known that he will be able to get away with it because of the type of individual that he is, with his access to wealth, to lawyers, to spin, to also the chicanery that he practices. He doesn't care for what happens to other people because he must get what he requires. He recognises that there will be turbulence. He recognises that he'll be criticised in the press. That's why he wouldn't react in an enraged way in the same way, for instance, that Donald Trump does. He would act in a considered manner because he understands that these are the vagaries of life in politics, that these are the peaks and troughs that one experiences. And in the circumstances, he knows that you have to ride out the battles in order to win the war. That is the mindset of the Upper Greater, seeing the bigger picture, seeing the fact that he knows that ultimately he's going to win. It's a little bit like investing in the stock market and knowing that ultimately you're going to make a killing. Whilst others are losing their nerve as the stock drops to begin with, you know, because, for instance, you've got inside information, or that you're a dab hand at dealing with these matters, or that you're able to control the stock market by influencing it. You can sit there content in the knowledge that whilst other people are cacking their pants as the stock plunges, You know that there's a killing to be made by way of buying the stock and then knowing, for the reasons that I've just explained, that it's going to bounce back up. The upper greater, as a consequence of their ability to think ahead, their intelligence, their charisma, their access to information, knows what the outcome is before anybody else. And thus, with the mass provision of challenge fuel that Bill Clinton received as a consequence of his impeachment, he was able to deal with it very easily because he knew that he wouldn't be impeached. And therefore, all he had to do was ride out the process and complete his second term, which is what he did. Thus, how was he able to maintain control? Well, he did it from a position of withdrawal. Basically, he dismissed these problems because he knew what the outcome would be. It therefore didn't threaten his control in the same way that it might for other narcissists. He didn't dismiss it by simply saying, "It doesn't apply to me," or "this is fake news," or "that's wrong." He recognized the legitimacy of the complaints that were being made. After all, he knew he had sex with Lewinsky. He knew that he told a lie, and he deliberately told a lie. But he was able to negate the threats to control because he knew that ultimately he was going to win. And the knowledge of the ultimate win enables him to dismiss and nullify the threats to control that occur en route to that ultimate win. This is a particular difference that you will find with regard to the greater mentality compared to the way that the mid-range narcissist or the lesser narcissist would deal with threats to control. They operate very much in the moment. And whilst the threat to control for the greater is in the moment, it is affected by the knowledge that ultimately the overall gain will be made. The war will be won. The outcome will justify the difficulties that have occurred along the way. And Clinton, like he did with so many of the other scandals, simply knew that he would walk away from it, that he wouldn't be impeached, that he would win. And that knowledge allowed him to dismiss the threats to control along the way, because ultimately he was going to succeed. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.